What is significant about the next 7 years in the run up to 2030?
I think it's a really interesting period. We're in a really tough spot. Existential threats are the big things you've got to look at that present the biggest danger or challenge to a species. Let me rank them in order of which present the biggest threat to me and my organisation. And let me get a strategy. The first existential threat is...
Hi Martin, I've heard you speak a lot about the sort of threats that are facing organisations and humanity. Do you think you could maybe delve into that a bit more and name what the most threatening things are?
Yeah, sounds quite deep that as a topic, doesn't it? What are the threats to humanity? But I've been covering this quite a bit in talks recently, on stage, but also in client sessions. If we start with this, existential threats is the term. And for hundreds of thousands of years, we've been very good at surviving as human beings. At T2, we always talk about survival, and that the brain works in a way which is primarily governed for survival. And we've been good at that because we're really good at spotting what the big existential threats to our existence is. Now, millions of years ago, the existential threats was very simple. It was running from saber-toothed tigers, trying to stay alive every day and not be poisoned or eaten. That was it. That was our existential threats. Fast forward to today, they're not our existential threats anymore, are they? We don't get eaten, or we don't live every moment of our life is life or death. But we do have what I call the big five. And I think it's worth starting here before we go into the organisational piece of what we need to look at over the next 7 years in terms of what presents the biggest existential threats to us as businesses and organisations. I think we have to start at the beginning and look at, well, what are our big five as a species? The first existential threat to humanity is a natural disaster. So things like a meteorite hitting the earth and wiping us out, or a global tsunami, whatever it might be, this one big compelling event, this natural disaster which ends the world and humanity. Highly unlikely to happen, once in a billion years maybe, but natural disaster does present an existential threat to humanity. Number two, widespread disease. I think COVID has given us a bit of a shot in the arm with this. Literally. And I think widespread disease still has the potential to wipe out humanity. It's an existential threat. But I would say that it's unlikely this would happen, because by the time it's spread through a percentage of the world's population, we probably have a cure, an antidote, or a vaccine. But it does present, it is the second biggest threat to humanity. The third one, which I think arguably is probably the most likely, is ecological breakdown, or ecological and biological breakdown of the planet, which is not just climate change, it's not just warming, that's one small element of it. It's if this planet ever breaks down ecologically, i.e. we cannot maintain food sources and energy sources, and we cannot have the variation of organisms on the planet that is required for it to all work and tick, then we're stuffed, right? So ecological breakdown, possibly out of this five, is the biggest one, and I think we're going a long way to be able to try and solve some of that. Number four, artificial intelligence. Everybody's favourite topic at the minute, AI. This is not about watching the film I, Robot and thinking we're all going to get wiped off the planet in 30 years by killer artificial intelligence. It may happen. It's highly unlikely it's going to. But AI it's no longer emerging, it is upon us. We've seen that with ChatGPT, right? It's upon us, and I think we don't know what AI means for the future fully just yet. Does it present this greatest opportunity to kick on to the next level of humanity, or does it absolutely change the world and spoil the landscape that we know? We don't know. It does present a potential existential threat, although unlikely. Nuclear, 5. So nuclear war has always been one of the existential threats to humanity. To this point, we've avoided it. I think we're doing well to reduce our nuclear footprint on the planet, but it always will be there in the wrong hands. Unlikely, definitely more there as a deterrent, for example, but it is one of the 5. So when you look at that, there's 5 things that pose an existential threat to humanity. And what we do is we rank them in order. If you think about governments and the World Economic Forum and whoever it might be, the World Health Organization, you look at them and you're thinking all governments, all countries are trying to say which ones present the biggest threat. Natural disaster, unlikely, we can't do anything about that. Disease, unlikely, and if so, we're probably prepared for it. AI, it's within our hands to a certain extent, but it's relatively unknown at this point. Nuclear, definitely within our hands, which leaves ecological breakdown, which is why I think all resources, money and focus at the minute is trying to go into correcting the way that we live on this planet and trying to sustain it for a longer period of time. So if this makes sense, Tom, to your original question, existential threats are the big things you've got to look at that present the biggest danger or challenge to a species or to the way that we live. And those are the big 5. If you think about applying this to business and organizations, what we're doing a lot of at the minute is we're talking to clients about what presents the biggest potential existential threats to you as an organization or a business. And it sounds dramatic, but we're sort of saying, let's look at now 2023 to 2030. What has the potential to wipe you out, to take your organization down, right? To absolutely wipe you off the face of the earth in terms of a business or an organization. And there's 5. I mean, there's 6 really, but there's 5 that, and we'll mention the 6th at the end, but there's 5 that I think over the next 7 years, we've really got to look at. And we've got to try and tackle and get right, because in all 5 areas, it also presents a great opportunity to exploit or to leverage. So number 1 for organizations out there, and this specifically is over the next 18 to 24 months, the first couple of years over the next 7, if you like, is the economic downturn. So we know now, sat here in 2023, that inflation is at an all-time high. You know, it's driving up the cost of living and it's putting a squeeze on everybody. Now, we're not officially in a recession yet because you have to have 2 back-to-back quarters of a declining economy to be in a recession. And they say we're going to avoid it, but I'm not so sure. This can't continue. I think as we enter into 2024, if inflation rates stay high and if cost of living continues to be a challenge, something's got to give. Now, that will all constitute to a strained economic situation or an economic downturn, which means that consumers are going to stop spending money as much as they usually would. Business to business are going to stop spending money. People are going to try and manage cash. People are going to batten down the hatches. That only leads to it being more difficult for you as an organization to thrive and grow, revenue and profit-wise. So I think economic downturn needs to be your main focus over the next 18 to 24 months. And it's not doom and gloom. It presents an opportunity for you to pivot and be agile with this. But the number 1 thing I would say that we're working with clients and organizations on at the minute is, what is your value proposition? Your value proposition, i.e. the value of your products and services that you provide to others, has to be stronger than ever. Because the luxuries and the capital expenditure and the nice to haves are going to come under scrutiny. And if you remotely fit in that bracket, or you could be perceived as in that bracket, then you've got to do something about it. Value proposition over the next 2 years is everything. Bring your product or service alive in the mind of the buyer. How do we help you deliver true business outcomes or navigate this period? If you do that well, you will thrive. If not, you will see people's spending habits decline and you will see revenues come under scrutiny and everything will squeeze. And that could, if you're already lean and tight right now, or you're already battling right now, which many organizations are, it could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. So number 1 is economic downturn. Focus on it, leverage it, pivot, and make sure your value proposition is stronger than ever. Number 2, supply chain. We have a strain on our supply chain globally at the minute. And if you think about it, there's a number of reasons for this. Brexit here in the UK and across Europe. Then we had COVID, which absolutely disrupted supply chains. The war in the Ukraine has had a significant impact on supply and materials. And again, cost of living, high inflation, and fast heading towards a potential recession. So all of these things in a short space of time have contributed to us not being able to produce and ship and receive goods and materials in the timely fashion we once received them. And if you're a business out there and you're heavily reliant on supply chain, i.e. what you do, you need materials and goods to keep it all flowing and to deliver to your customers, you're probably feeling it right now. What also happens is then the costs for those materials, the more rare and scarce they are, the costs for those materials will go up as well. So it becomes more expensive to trade and to run a business and to produce. And this is what happens, isn't it? It's like the supply chain becomes disrupted when there is a lack of labour and production and supply. And then what happens when that meets panic and stockpiling, because organisations have no other opportunity but to go, right, let's fill the warehouse, let's get as much as we can when we can, which then compounds the supply chain issue, right? That's twofold. That continues to disrupt the supply chain, number one. Number two, you now have expended a lot of cash on stockpiling, and if you're not confident that you can trade and get rid of that, it could send you over the edge. And I think there's a lot of organisations, whether it's manufacturing, construction, logistics, whatever it might be, supermarkets, retail out there, who are probably experiencing a similar thing. So over the next few years and into the next 5 years, the supply chain has to correct itself, and we have to do a better job of labour, production, shipping, and being able to trade again. Once the economic situation improves, inflation reduces, it should start to hopefully get a bit better. But as an organisation, if you depend on it, it's got to be one of your number one focuses over the next couple of years. What's your strategy? Don't get railroaded into stockpiling. What's your cadence? How are you going to navigate this situation to be able to make sure that you understand there is a disruption in supply chain and it could propose an existential threat to your business? Number three, we're going to say it again, same, it's the only one that links into the humanity one, is artificial intelligence, AI. The reason it's on that list over the next 7 years is because we've seen ChatGPT. It creates an opportunity. In fact, organisations are already leveraging it. You know, we can now write a blog for our website in a nanosecond. A good quality, accurate blog by clicking a button, typing in a phrase and clicking a button. You no longer need people researching, validating, writing, spell checking, publishing a blog. It can be done in a nanosecond. You could write a contract of employment in a nanosecond. You could get the governing law in a certain area in a nanosecond. It is speeding up our ability to research and process information in real time. So it creates an opportunity, also creates a problem because we don't know the risks of ChatGPT being on the World Wide Web and integrating with organisations and systems right now. Who knows what that actually transpires to be in a couple of years' time. The security of it is a big question. But AI is going to transform the way we do businesses. And if you're sat out there now and you're a law firm or an accountant or a HR advisory firm or whatever it might be, where your primary business model is to provide information and data to other people, which is already in the public domain, you are at risk. Because this could take over. This absolutely could take over. I'm thinking about it from a leadership and management perspective, from a consultancy perspective. How are we going to do it? Well, you've got two options. You can fight it and ignore it, or you can leverage it and embody it in your organisation for the greater good. The big $1 million question right now, though, is it safe to do so? What's the risks? Is it too early? There's lots of ambiguity around it at the minute, which I think is making people feel uncertain, but it's in the top 5 existential threats to your organisation in some fashion if you don't start understanding what this means for you and how you can either leverage it or how it's going to impact your business and your customers and the way you interact in the coming years. Number 4, for organisations, it's what I'm calling the talent war. It's a big problem. I think this is the one that people are going to feel within the next 5 to 7 years, certainly in some sectors. And that is this: it's hard to get people. It's not only hard to get talent and people, it's hard to retain them. And the catalyst for this is, over the last 10 to 15 years, people are now not bound by proximity, i.e. the way they do business, the way they can go work for an employer. 15 years ago, we were restricted to the top 10 employers in your region because the place of work was very much somewhere where you went, a physical factory, an office, a place of work. Whereas now you can work for anyone, anywhere on the planet, from your back bedroom. You can work for any organisation in any country. So what happened was our talent pool within a region, within an area, became incredibly diluted because we were competing with the world for this talent. Now the same could be said that as a business, your opportunity is that your pool is now bigger. You can fish in the world's pond for talent, but you have to be an organisation who is set up to embrace that, who doesn't mind somebody sat in their house in San Francisco working for you in the UK or vice versa. You've got to be set up to cater for that. But going back to it, the talent war is on. Generational shift is contributing towards this. We have more lower end of millennials and Generation Z in an organisation than ever before. They're actually outnumbering Generation X and baby boomers. And we know that these people, specifically in the pandemic, really reevaluated what it is they want, who they want to work for, what their careers look like. And the great resignation happened shortly after the pandemic, where I think 20% of people resigned from their jobs because they completely just thought to themselves, is this what I want? I quite like flexibility. I quite like the ability to be a little bit in charge of my own lifestyle. So going forward, you're in a talent war. And I think we look at the big indicators here at T2 and in our research of what people are looking for and what you must cater for in your environment if you're going to win this talent war. Number one, diversity and inclusion. People are looking for that in organisations more than ever. Number two, flexibility. That the pandemic and remote working and hybrid working has highlighted that people can operate with a level of flexibility, and it ain't going to go back to that fixed infrastructure wholly as it was before. It doesn't matter what your opinion is on that, because I've got my own opinion on that. And we at T2, we primarily work in an infrastructure. It suits us, we all agree to it, but flexibility is key. Digital dexterity. People are looking for organisations, especially the younger generations, which can provide digital dexterity, the ability for them to use tools, technology, digital capability within their work and apply skills through that. Above average pay. You know, cost of living is tough. Inflation is high. If you're not competitive on average or above average pay, it's not the driver for everybody, but it's definitely now an option where they can go and get it elsewhere. So we've got to be incredibly competitive. And finally, leadership and cultures. You know, never before in evolution has something that has come after retracted to what it has before. By the nature of the term evolution is things evolve to something different over time. So if you are sat there now and you are one of these people who gets caught up in a conversation that says, well, when I started work, I'd get a strip ripped off me and it'd drive accountability and I'd just crack on and get the job done. You're living in cuckoo land. It's not going to cater for the current and future generations in the workplace. Leadership has to be authentic. Leadership has to be both supportive and assertive when we talk about reaching that chasm. It's got to be fair. It's got to be inclusive. We've got to cater for a different management and leadership style as we go forward to drive performance and productivity in our workplaces. It isn't going to retract to the old days, and nor should it. We can't go too far and overcompensate, and this is for another day. We can't overcompensate, but we've got to find that middle ground, and we've got to develop a workplace that people want to join and stay. Tenure is at an all-time low, the amount of time people spend in organisations. Recruitment gaps and open headcounts are at an all-time high because there is a talent war on, and unless you are thinking about this and geared up to win, it will massively present an existential risk to your organisation over the next 7 years. Because what happens when nobody wants to work in a factory anymore? What happens when nobody leaves school wanting to be in the emergency services anymore, in our NHS or our fire service, or joining the police force or joining the military? What happens when nobody has a desire to be a bricklayer anymore? Some industries are going to be more challenged than others, but there is a talent war on for a number of reasons. Generationally, digitally, right, from a flexible working perspective, and geographically, and you're not bound by proximity anymore. You've got to be thinking about this as an organisation. And finally, number 5, a term which I think no longer can be ignored, but is usually seen as a bit boring at times, but it's absolutely not. It's cyber security. You know, cyber security is now becoming possibly the biggest existential risk to an organisation. If you think about it, phishing emails and ransomware attacks used to be a monthly, bi-monthly attempt. They're not even daily now, they're hourly. I mean, even here at T2, the amount of time emails we receive, people pretending to be me, asking people to pay invoices, bogus invoices and money, is an hourly sort of daily thing. And it doesn't matter how much you block them and report it, and the next one comes in waves. Education of your employees is everything. What to look out for, what not to do. So it's not just like cybersecurity from a technology and a firewall perspective. It's cultural, it's educational, it's getting out there and making sure employees and people can spot these type of things. So you've got to be proactive with this, because if you think back to the number 3 we said on the existential threat to organizations, artificial intelligence, there are organizations set up around the world now whose sole job is phishing and ransomware. It's just happening. What happens when they start adopting artificial intelligence to be able to formulate attacks and to start breaching systems? Could be a scary world, right? Our best form of defense is probably some AI that can recognize it and block it. However, the point being is, it's going to increase. Cyber criminals are going to get more sophisticated, and you have got to be prepared for it, because it could end you overnight. It really, really could. So cyber is in the top 5 existential threats. So just to sort of recap those big 5 that I think over the next 7 years organizations need to be looking at. Number 1, in the immediate future, we've got an economic downturn. And it's not disaster, and it's not saying you're going to go under, but what it's saying is spend is going to be scrutinized. You know, inflation rates are high. So we've got to understand our value proposition. It's got to be stronger than ever. We've got to make sure that our messaging is on point, that our product and service innovation is on point, and that we deliver. Number 2, there is definitely a supply chain disruption. Brexit, COVID, Ukraine, cost of living has all contributed to materials. The production of materials and the shipping of those materials is not as free-flowing as it once was. If you're in an industry that relies on that, you've got to understand your strategy around supply chain over the next couple of years. Artificial intelligence, start educating yourselves. It's not even coming, it's here. In 7 years, where's it going to be? What's the impact on your business? How are you going to engage with your customers? Are you going to use it and leverage it? What's the risks of that? Start educating yourself now. Number 4, the talent war. Really understand that talent is going to be more scarce than ever. They have more choice than ever, and they're looking for certain things. You have to create an environment which is diverse and inclusive. You have to create an environment that provides flexibility, that caters for digital dexterity, that can deliver above average rates of pay, and that has really strong, authentic leadership and a culture that caters for certainly millennials and Generation Z. And finally, cybersecurity. It's going to get more sophisticated. It's going to come more thick and fast. You need to educate yourselves, be aware, be protective technologically, but be educated culturally. That's the big one there. And if you do that, you won't go too far wrong.
What is it that you feel is significant about the next 5 or maybe even 7 years in the run-up to 2030?
What is significant about
that? In terms of the threats that
face
both as humanity and organisation.
If you think about it, 7 years doesn't seem a long time, does it? but it's probably going to go in a nanosecond, really. Before you know it, we'll be sat here doing a video and it's 2030. And you'll probably show me this and say, was you right? You know, was your prediction right? I think it's a really interesting period. And it's a really interesting period because we're in a really tough spot, I think, in 2023. I'm excited by it, by the way. It's not doom and gloom, but we're in a tough spot because we're in a tough spot because we've got an economic downturn, got high inflation rates, everybody's getting squeezed, got a supply chain problem around the world. We've got things like wars going on and political challenges. We've got this emergence of AI, which is upon us, which is both exciting and daunting in equal measure. We've just come out of a pandemic and people have realigned their values around what they want in the workplace and how they want to work for employees going forward. And we've got an ongoing emergence of cyber security and problems with cyber attacks and cyber criminals. So you look at all that and you think, Jesus, how is any business going to survive or thrive? Well, I think the answer to the question is being aware of the big things over the next 5 to 7 years that I've just described, being aware of them and going, right, let me rank them in order of which they present the biggest threat to me in my organization, and let me get a strategy around them. Let me get proactive and on the front foot so I can leverage all these things for success rather than be daunted by them or allow them to impact me and my organization, in a negative way. And I think that's what I see as the next 7 years for organizations. I think, as well as all the other stuff, customers, products and services, growth, all the rest of it, I think those things that I just mentioned are upon us. We're in a very tricky time. We have certain challenges around economics, supply chain, trading, and we have these massive game-changing things like AI, the world of work in which people want to engage with their organizations now, this hybrid remote sort of world, and cyber, the emergence of cyber and secure, and the need for data and device protection in organizations with information. And I think it's going to be a big 7 years on all fronts. I think it presents an opportunity, but I think only if you're proactive and on the front foot with this stuff and not just sat back allowing it to evolve around you. So, let's see how this plays out, Tom. In 2030, let's run another video side by side with this one, and let's see actually what has transpired. From a humanity perspective, let's hope we're doing the video in 7 years' time. I don't think there's going to be a natural disaster that wipes us out or widespread disease. I don't think killer AI robots we're going to be hiding in corners from them. And I don't think nuclear war will have transpired. Be interesting to review in 2030 how the ecological breakdown situation is going and where we're at that. But no, I don't think any of these are going to be massively advanced within 7 years. They do pose the biggest threats. I can't see them advancing to a point where we're in any form of tricky situation. From an organisational perspective, though, if you think about these 5, what will be interesting is if we sit down and review these. Did we survive, or how did we attack that 2023, 2024 economic downturn situation? Did we go into a recession in 2024? I think we will. Not saying that's a bad thing, but I think, will we experience 2 consecutive quarters of a reduced economy in 2024 with the way things are going? Yes, I do. I hope we don't, but yes, I do, right? Did it transpire? Either way, whether we do or we don't is by the by. Let's get ahead of the game and have a plan around how we're going to tackle this period of trading through 2023 and 2024. The supply chain problem, did we fix it? Or is it still ongoing? Do we have a labour and production problem? Is this lack of labour and production from humans with the emergence of artificial intelligence, is it actually increasing supply or is it reducing it? Who knows, right? But it presents a challenge right here and now, and I think we will overcome this, because we always have when it comes to production and supply. But is it still a challenge in 2030? It'd be really interesting to see if it is. Artificial intelligence. If we're doing this video in 2030, what are we talking about, right? What's been like delivered and innovated? What are businesses using? How is it working for our customers, for us, for the way we trade, for the systems we use in our businesses? Are there still marketing departments around? Is there still law firms, right? I'm sure there will be, but what's the impact of the emergence of artificial intelligence on these traditional services and industries and jobs? The talent war, is it still ongoing? Have we settled down? Has it gone 360 and people have gone back to the workplace and we're now higher by proximity? I don't think so. Are we going to have workplaces changed to become more diverse and cultures have become more open and catering for millennials and Generation Z? Do we have full digital dexterity in organisations? I think on this one, I'll bet everything on it. Yes, we will. There's no option. And 5, cybersecurity. Is it still an ongoing problem, or have we finally combated it? The problem with this is every time you come up with a solution, they get more clever with the threat. So be interesting to see if phishing and ransomware are a thing of the past, and there's new emerging cybersecurity threats which are fundamentally driven by artificial intelligence. 2030, let's run the video and see. Yeah, definitely. Even next year. Yeah. Year by year. Let's do a year by year update on it. But I just think people need to be thinking about these topics and not avoiding them, because they're going to potentially, in a big way, impact your business. But they could also potentially be a huge opportunity for businesses. Certainly when it comes to things like, diversifying your organisation and your culture to attract new blood and talent into that organisation. It could be with pure digital dexterity. I mean, anybody who's out there saying, Martin, that's bullshit because we're not a technology business. Well, you will be in 7 years or you won't be here. Don't care what you do, right? So digital dexterity is incredibly important. AI, massive opportunity, right? These are opportunities to be able to leverage sometimes, even in an economic downturn and with a lack of supply. If you're smart and you're clever, there can be leverage in there. You can grow, you can flourish and thrive, but you've got to shift. You've got to understand it, and you've got to have a strategy around it.
Are you a fan of our podcast? If so, make sure you're following us on all of our social media channels. You can find us on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter by searching Trans2 Performance. By following us, you'll have access to exclusive content, special announcements, and more. Join the T2 community today.